The first sign was the sound of children laughing high-pitched too many feet hitting my front steps at once. I opened the door and saw them all: my younger brother Zach, his wife Madison, their 3 kids, and my parents Carla and Greg. Uninvited, smiling like they belonged there. Zach pushed his sunglasses up and looked around the porch like he was doing a home inspection. His oldest, Noah, was already pressing his face against the living room window. Madison stood off to the side, holding their youngest, a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket, and giving me that tight, polite smile she always used when she was pretending we were friends. I hadn't given them my new address. No one in the family had been over ever. I didn't need to ask how they found me. Madison had a way of getting things. Carla walked in first without waiting for permission. "Look at this place," she said. "Rachel, you've really done well for yourself." It didn't sound like praise. It sounded like inventory. Greg nodded behind her, quiet as always. Zach followed them in without looking at me. The kids spread out, already picking rooms with their eyes. Madison stepped inside last, bouncing the baby and looking me dead in the eye. "It's just beautiful," she said. "Big, too." That was the moment I knew this wasn't a visit. This was a plan. And somehow I was the only one who hadn't been told. This wasn't new. It just hadn't happened in my house before. Growing up, the living room was Zach's kingdom. 3 years younger than me, but always louder, always messier, always forgiven. He broke the TV remote once, throwing it at my head. I got grounded for yelling. Mom Carla said I was too sensitive. Dad Greg just stared out the window like he couldn't hear either of us. When I turned 11, I started doing the laundry. By 13, I was packing lunches for both of us in the morning, setting his backpack out by the door so he wouldn't forget it. If I didn't, Mom would scold me for not helping the family. Zach got a Nintendo for his birthday when he turned 8. I got a cake from the grocery store and a card signed, "Love all of us." No names. He was the golden child and they didn't try to hide it. Carla loved introducing him to neighbors as our brilliant little athlete. I was Rachel. She's quiet into computers or something. When I brought home my first A in calculus, no one noticed. When Zach scraped a C in biology, we went out for ice cream to celebrate effort. By the time I was 15, Zach had already shoved me down the stairs once playing, he said. I wore long sleeves for a week to hide the bruise on my shoulder. Carla made me promise not to say anything if Grandma asked about it at Thanksgiving. "We don't need drama," she said. "Not with your brother's future on the line." After that, I stopped asking for anything. No prom dress, no rides to study group. I learned to walk instead. The school library stayed open late and the janitor would let me sit in the corner until my legs stopped aching. At 17, the night I left, I didn't even pack a full bag. Just a hoodie, some notebooks, and a charger. I had $200 in a coffee can and a bus schedule I printed from the library. Carla told me not to come back unless I had real direction. I was still in high school, but direction wasn't the problem. The problem was that I stopped being useful. I stayed on friends' couches for months, graduated on time. They didn't come. No call, no card. I told myself it was better that way. Clean cuts heal faster. After that, I never went back for holidays. No 4th of July barbecues. No Christmas stockings. If they noticed, they didn't say. Or maybe they just liked it better with one less place at the table. Zach got married at 22. I wasn't invited. I saw photos posted online. Maddie in a white lace dress, smiling wide, Zach next to her with his arm around her waist, like he'd never done a wrong thing in his life. They had their first kid a year later, the second right after. By then, they'd already moved into my parents' house because childcare was easier that way. Carla doted on them, posted weekly photos. 3 generations under one roof. I wasn't in a single one. From then on, I was what they called me behind closed doors, the one who left. The one who didn't understand what family meant. The one who made her own bed, so let her lie in it. I had, for years. But it wasn't a bed I was worried about anymore. It was the foundation underneath it. In the spring of 2020, the world shut down, and so did my lease. My job was the first to go. I'd worked as a QA contractor for a logistics software firm. No severance, just a form email and a final paycheck that barely covered the month. My roommate lasted 2 weeks longer before packing up and heading back to her parents' place in Michigan. I didn't have that option. The condo we'd been renting was too expensive for me alone. I sold most of what I had: furniture monitors, a full-length mirror I loved, just to make rent that last month. Then I stopped sleeping inside. There wasn't much left to hold on to. What I did have was my truck. A beat-up silver Ford with more dents than paint. And a camper I bought second-hand on a whim 3 years prior. $1, $200 cash, still had the receipt. I'd told myself I might go camping one day. I never did. Instead, I bolted the camper to the truck bed, swept out the dust, and made it livable barely. Foam mattress, one small fridge, and a plastic bin of clothes. I parked behind a strip mall on my first night. Streetlights kept blinking overhead. A group of teens skated by after midnight. One threw an empty can at my tailgate. I didn't sleep, just laid there, palms flat against the inside wall, listening for footsteps. The next day, I called my parents, told them the truth. Job gone, lease ended, just needed a driveway to park in for a while. Carla didn't hesitate. "That's not going to work for us," she said. "We've got the kids here, it's too crowded." Zach got on the phone next. "If you want to park here," he said, "you're going to pay rent." The number he named was almost double what a lot nearby would have charged. I didn't argue, just hung up. After that, it was parking lots. Grocery stores, abandoned office parks, a side street near the river. I found outlets on the back of laundromats to charge my batteries. Used solar when I could. Showered at the gym, or if that didn't work, used the public sink in a 24-hour gas station. I kept my mail at a friend's apartment. Ate canned soup cold more times than I care to count. Once in July, the fridge failed overnight and ruined everything I had. When I finally found a warehouse job in a neighboring city, I offered to take night shifts. No commute. I lived in the back lot. The owner looked the other way. "You show up on time," he said. "That's more than most." He let me use the water tap and a spare outlet by the generator. Even cleared out space so I could unhook the camper and drive the truck during the day. It wasn't comfort, but it was stability. And after the year I'd had, that counted for everything. 2 winters passed like that. I never told my parents where I was. Didn't send updates. Didn't ask them to care. And they didn't. It was about 3 weeks after I posted a photo of my new house, just the porch steps, my hand holding the keys. No caption, just a single word: home. I didn't give anyone the address. But one evening, just after I'd finished setting up my camper in the backyard, half habit, half insurance, I heard a knock. Then another. Then the door opened without waiting for me. They came in like it was a Sunday open house. Carla first, of course, with a Tupperware of something she claimed was for me. Madison next, carrying her baby and surveying the kitchen like she was already planning where to hang photos. Zach followed, pointing at the ceilings, the baseboards. The kids ran past him. Greg lingered by the front door, holding his jacket like he wasn't sure how long they'd stay. "This is beautiful, Rachel," Carla said. "You really did well for someone on her own." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Madison moved from room to room, commenting on the layout. 3 bedrooms. That's so generous. Honestly, it's bigger than I expected. Almost more than one person would ever need. Zach was quieter, but his eyes never stopped moving. Closer to my work than I thought, he said once, like he was talking to himself. I stood in the hallway, back against the wall, watching them move through my space. The rooms weren't big. The floors still creaked. I hadn't hung pictures yet. But it was mine. They didn't ask to see the house. They didn't ask if they could come inside. They just moved like they already belonged. When Zach finally turned to me, his hands were in his pockets and his voice was too casual. "Got a minute?" he asked. The others all stepped outside too quickly. Carla herding the kids. Madison still holding the baby, humming under her breath. Greg looked at me once before turning away. I followed Zach into the kitchen. He leaned against the counter like it was his. "This place," he said, "it's really something. But you know it's too much, right?" He paused, looked at me, then kept going. "I mean, you've got the camper already. You know how to live light. And we've got the baby and another on the way. Plus, this is 15 minutes from my job." I didn't speak. "So I was thinking Maddie and I, the kids, we could move in here, just until we get on our feet. You could set up the camper in the backyard again like before. You're used to it." He smiled like it was a done deal. Like it made sense to everyone but me. And still, I said nothing. because deep down, I'd always known they'd come. Just never thought they'd be this bold. 3 days passed in silence after that conversation in the kitchen. They left that night with vague goodbyes and too many lingering glances. I didn't hear from any of them after. Then Friday came. I pulled into my driveway just after 6 takeout in the passenger seat, keys in hand, and saw the moving truck before I saw anything else. It was backed up almost to the porch. Zach's van parked beside it. The front door was wide open. Boxes were stacked in the entryway. Children's toys on the floor. I could hear the television from the street, some cartoon playing at full volume. Zach stepped out with a lamp in his hands. He didn't flinch, just nodded like I was the one who was late. Madison appeared behind him holding the baby. She grinned. "It's happening," she said sweetly. "We're so glad you're letting us stay." She turned toward the living room before I could speak. I didn't go inside. I walked back to my truck, locked the doors, and called the police. While the phone rang, I cracked the window just enough to breathe. That's when Madison came up to the glass, tapped twice with her fingernail. "You don't have to do this," she said. "Just let it happen. It's better for the kids." Then quieter with a tilt of the head. "Your mom said it's okay. And you always listen to her, don't you?" The 911 operator came on. I gave my name, the address, told them my house was being taken without my consent. When the officers arrived, Madison tried to charm them. Zach stayed inside, pretending to be busy assembling a crib. I walked them through what happened, showed my driver's license, the deed, even pointed out the broken front lock, its core drilled out, and the old brass knob tossed on the porch like trash. The drill they used was still sitting there, plugged into an extension cord. The officers knocked. Zach opened the door holding a stack of papers. "A lease," he said. "We have a lease." I took it from him. My name was there. My signature, too. Except it wasn't mine. I held it next to my ID, let the officer see how the two didn't match. The loops, the slant, even the misspelling in my middle name. I looked at Zach. "This is fraud." His mouth opened, then closed again. Behind him, Maddie's voice rose, trying to say something about doing it for the children, for the future, for family. The officer asked them both to step outside. That's when my parents showed up. Carla in full posture. Greg just behind her, hands shoved deep in his pockets. She walked straight toward the police and said with perfect clarity, "My daughter agreed to this." I didn't turn to her. I just handed the fake lease to the officer and said loud enough for all of them to hear. "This isn't just a lie, it's a felony. And if one more person walks into this house like they own it, I'll press charges." Madison broke first. She tore the lease in half, then into quarters, then into shreds. Tossed them like confetti onto the porch. The wind carried some into the yard. One of the officers told her to pick them up. Zach said nothing. Carla didn't cry this time. She just looked at me, jaw clenched. "You're being cruel," she said. I looked back at her steady. "No, I'm being clear." The officers asked them all to leave the property immediately, and for once they did quiet with no more pleading, but I knew that wasn't the end. People like them never leave with the door closed. They leave with it slightly ajar, waiting to come back. Christmas Eve came with freezing rain and the smell of cinnamon from my aunt's pie. I'd invited 10 people. Half were cousins I hadn't seen in years. The rest my uncle, his wife, 2 old college friends came from out of state. Some drove 3 hours just to be there. They brought folding chairs, homemade food, and music on scratched CDs. One of them, my Uncle Don, had even burned a Ray Charles Christmas album. He said no holiday felt right without it. We laughed more than I expected. No one asked about my parents. No one mentioned Zach. They'd all read the post months earlier before I locked down my profile, and none of them had questioned it. Around 8 p.m., the door opened. I hadn't invited them. I never even gave them the time. But there they were. Carla first holding a tray of store-bought cookies like that made a difference. Greg behind her, stiff and silent. Zach walked in with his hands raised like he came in peace. Madison followed no baby this time, just makeup perfume and that permanent pout. They all said Merry Christmas like it was still theirs to say. The music stopped. Chairs creaked. My cousin Lauren stood up slowly, arms crossed. Uncle Don looked at me waiting. I didn't say anything. Then he turned to Carla. "You weren't invited," he said. Carla smiled. We came to make amends. Dawn didn't move. No. You came to be seen. That's different. The room stayed still. Madison tried to explain about the kids about space, about not meaning to cause trouble. Her voice rose with each word until she was talking over herself. Then came the tears. She dropped into one of the chairs, hands covering her face, crying loud enough for the baby to hear from another zip code. She kept saying how unfair it was that a woman with 4 kids has to live in a crowded house while someone with none gets all this. I stayed standing, arms at my sides. Madison looked up, tear-streaked and shaking. You don't even have a family, Rachel. And we do. Behind her, Zach stared at the carpet. Carla looked ready to defend her, but my aunt beat her to it. You had a family, she said to Carla sharp. You had 2 children, but you made one disappear. Carla blinked. You erased her, my aunt continued. When she needed you, you laughed, and now that she doesn't, you come bearing cookies. No one replied. Zach shifted his weight, tried to speak, but Dawn cut him off. You tried to steal her house, he said. That's not a misunderstanding. That's theft. The last voice came from the hallway. My grandmother. Thin, small, barely heard, all evening said softly, I saw the lease. I saw the broken lock, and I saw the photos from the years you left her out. She looked at me then. You don't owe them forgiveness. I nodded once. That was it. No screaming, no storming. Just silence, so thick it swallowed the room. Carla stepped back first. She left the cookies on the counter. Madison wiped her face and followed. Zach didn't look up once. Greg lingered. He opened the door last. Merry Christmas, he said, but it didn't sound like he meant it. We didn't answer. They didn't try to come back inside after that. The door closed. The music resumed soft, hesitant at first, like the room had to remember how to be warm again. Someone turned Ray Charles back on. The lights flickered as the heater kicked in. No one mentioned what just happened. We passed plates, refolded napkins. My friend Sarah poured wine for the table like we hadn't just watched a family unravel. Later, I stepped outside with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The yard was quiet. A few guests had started claiming sleeping bags in the camper, curious to see how I'd lived. One cousin said it reminded him of being a kid again. He meant it kindly. I stayed on the porch for a while, letting the cold hit my face. They had come into my house with smiles as if they hadn't tried to take it. They left with cookies and pity parties, and not one of them said they were sorry. Maybe they never would. That was the thing about people like them. They didn't believe in consequences. Only inconveniences, and being told no was always the worst kind. Inside, someone laughed. I heard the sound of forks on plates of kids sneaking second helpings of dessert, the kind of normal noise I'd never heard in my parents' house unless Zach was the one being celebrated. I didn't go back in right away. I just stood on the porch, held the blanket tight, and said it quietly out loud to no one. I was there. They just didn't see me. Christmas morning came quiet. The house still smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Someone had already started a second pot. I stepped over folded blankets, empty wine glasses, a half-finished plate of pie, the kind of mess that meant people felt safe here. Outside, frost glazed the truck. The camper sat just beyond the fence line, pale in the winter light. A cousin had slept out there. She'd left the curtain half open, and I could see a folded quilt on the bench seat. Neat, respectful. I walked around the side yard, ran a hand across the aluminum siding. The same camper I'd once cried inside, teeth clenched, whispering that I would never beg again. I didn't. I passed the spot where Zach had parked the moving truck. Grass still dead in the shape of its tires. A single zip tie lay in the dirt, probably from one of the boxes he'd never unpacked. Nothing stolen, nothing broken. Just a plan that failed. Before going back in, I paused at the porch. The front light was still on. I hadn't turned it off. They said I didn't have a family, but last night, 10 people stayed in my home, shared food-washed dishes, told old stories. No one cried in the hallway. No one threw anything. No one asked me to leave. I stood at the door, then reached up and flipped the porch light off. No need to leave it on for anyone anymore.